Now, there's one moment that's often really overlooked when it comes to thinking about meetings and workshops and how they're put together. And that's actually the start of the workshop and meeting. And I don't mean when the meeting officially kicks off. It's the part where people are turning up. So it's very rare that people will turn up all at the same time. It's often people will come in kind of dribs and drabs. And that experience, if we can think a little bit about that experience and how we kind of intentionally create that experience, it can really impact the energy, vibe, and mindset of your participants. Typically what happens when we don't think about it is that people arrive in dribs and drabs, there's lots of kind of sidebar conversations, and sometimes that can be productive for your workshop or meeting, but sometimes it can derail the workshop and meeting as well. So if people are, coming in, they're complaining about a recent business change that just happened, it starts things off on a bit of a negative foot, and that might not be what you're after. Now, this exact scenario happens in the world of junior soccer coaching. So I work with a group of players, and bear in mind these players, sometimes they've been at school all day, they're tired, and if we don't think about that moment where they arrive, so if I just let them loose, often that can result in chaos in the actual training session. So what I really want to do is think carefully about the arrival activity. So what happens when my players start arriving in dribs and drabs? And often, I'll get a couple of players and then a couple more will come along. And the arrival activity can be a really neat way to get people into the right mindset for the training session that's just coming up. And the key to a good arrival activity really is that it's connected to the training session that's happening. And I can easily kind of start, as soon as I've got one or two players, I can start and I can integrate people in when they're arriving really easily without having to explain lots of different instructions. And so I find these sessions work really well. The arrival activity comes in, the players come along, they do the arrival activity, and as soon as I've got sufficient numbers or the time's right, I'll start the training session proper, and people are in the right mindset for training, and they're already focused on some of the things that I might be wanting to focus on in training, like passing, crossing, shooting, whatever it might be. And I think the same thing applies to your workshops and team meetings. If you can think carefully about the arrival activity, when people start arriving, maybe what are some of the things you might want them to do? Some of the things I've found from experience that work quite well, reflection questions are great. So having some reflection questions that are tied to the outcomes of the meeting. So as soon as people arrive, they've got some things to maybe think and ponder, and you might get them to write these things down. You might get them to share their insights. This all depends on the type of energy and vibe you want to create in your meeting or workshop. Another thing I'll find works quite well is reading. So if there's some reading that might be useful for people to do as part of the workshop, and it's not so extensive that it needs to be pre-reading, having that as an arrival activity can be quite good. And again, it scales up and down quite well. So as people arrive, obviously the people that arrive sooner, they get a little bit more time than the people that perhaps arrive a little bit later. Pre-reading can be quite good. I also find, little games and activities can be quite good if you're trying to create this upbeat vibe and energy. Incorporating light and simple games can be a neat technique as well. And lastly, I'm a huge fan of using music as well. So if you just wanted to kind of, create a certain type of energy, picking the right kind of soundtrack as an arrival activity where people come in, I think it can really help shape the tone of your meeting or workshop. So hopefully that's given you some ideas about things you can use as arrival activities to help create the type of energy, focus and mindset that you want for your workshops.